Welcome, everyone. Today we're embarking on a fascinating journey through the science of human sexuality. This is a topic that touches all of our lives, yet it's often shrouded in mystery, misconception, and taboo. But science is shedding new light on the biological, psychological, and cultural aspects of human sexuality, and that's what we'll be exploring in this video. Over the next hour or so, we'll be delving into several key themes that researchers have been investigating. How human sexuality differs from that of other animals. The evolutionary origins and functions of our sexual behaviors and attractions. How culture and biology interact to shape human sexual norms. The diversity of human sexual expression across cultures and throughout history. And the ongoing debates and open questions in this field. Now, you might be wondering, why should we care about this kind of research? Well, understanding the evolutionary roots of human sexuality can shed light on all kinds of questions. Why do we form the kinds of relationships we do? Where do our social norms around sex come from? How can we explain the wide diversity of sexual orientations and gender identities we see in humans? This research has implications for psychology, medicine, anthropology, and even how we structure our societies. Whether you're a student, a professional in a related field, or just a curious person, keeping up with this kind of scientific literature can be incredibly enlightening. It challenges our assumptions, expands our perspective, and gives us a deeper appreciation for the complexity of human nature. In this video, we'll be looking at broad themes and findings from across the field, rather than focusing on any specific studies. My goal is to give you a big picture view of where the research in this area is headed. By the end, you should have a solid grasp of the major ideas and debates shaping our scientific understanding of human sexuality. A couple of quick disclaimers before we dive in. First, this is a huge and complex field, so we won't be able to cover everything. I've tried to focus on some of the most interesting and well-supported findings, but there's always more to explore. Second, some of the topics we'll discuss may be sensitive for some viewers. I'll do my best to address everything respectfully and scientifically, but please be aware that we will be talking frankly about sex and sexuality. Lastly, I want to emphasize that when we talk about normal in a scientific context, we're talking about what's common or typical, not what's right or wrong. Human sexuality is incredibly diverse, and that diversity is a natural and valuable part of our species. Alright, let's get started on our journey through the evolution of human sexuality. We've got a lot of fascinating ground to cover. Part 1. The uniqueness of human sexuality. Let's begin by looking at how human sexuality compares to that of other animals, especially our closest primate relatives. This gives us important clues about the evolutionary forces that have shaped human sexual behavior. One of the most striking things about human sexuality is how much of it happens in private. Most animals mate openly, without any sense of modesty or privacy. But humans universally seek out private spaces for sex. We've developed elaborate cultural norms and practices around sexual privacy. For example, consider the universal taboo against public sex. Even in cultures with more relaxed attitudes towards nudity, like the Kung San of the Kalahari Desert, sexual activity is still kept private. This suggests that concealed mating may have offered some evolutionary advantage to our ancestors. Another key difference is that humans have sex far more frequently than is needed for reproduction. Most animals only mate when the female is fertile. Chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, typically mate for only 6 to 8 days during a female's menstrual cycle. But humans engage in sex throughout the menstrual cycle, during pregnancy, and long past reproductive age. Think about it. A human couple might have sex hundreds or even thousands of times for each child conceived. This suggests sex serves important social and pair bonding functions in humans beyond just making babies. Speaking of babies, human infants are incredibly helpless compared to other primate offspring. A newborn chimpanzee can cling to its mother's fur almost immediately after birth. But human babies can't even hold up their own heads for months. They require years of intensive care and protection. Researchers think this extended period of helplessness may have driven the evolution of long-term pair bonding in humans. Unlike most other primates, human fathers often play a significant role in childcare. Sexual monogamy, or at least serial monogamy, may have helped ensure paternal investment in offspring. Humans also show much more diversity in sexual orientation than we see in other animals. While same-sex behavior has been observed in many species, humans are unique in having individuals with stable same-sex orientations. This has led to fascinating debates about whether homosexuality itself may have served some evolutionary function. For instance, consider the gay uncle hypothesis. This theory suggests that having a small percentage of non-reproducing individuals in a group might have benefited overall survival by providing additional caregivers for children. While this idea is still debated, it shows how researchers are thinking creatively about the evolutionary roots of human sexual diversity. Finally, humans are one of the only species to have sex face-to-face. Most animals, including our closest primate relatives, mate from behind. Face-to-face sex allows for eye contact, kissing, and other intimate behaviors that may reinforce social bonds. Some researchers think this shift to face-to-face mating may have been a crucial step in the evolution of human pair bonding and complex social relationships. So in summary, human sexuality is characterized by private, concealed mating, frequent non-reproductive sex, long-term pair bonding, diversity in sexual orientation, and face-to-face sexual positioning. All of these traits set us apart from other animals and point to the unique evolutionary pressures that shaped human sexuality. In the next section, we'll dive deeper into some of the theories about why these traits evolved. Part 2. Evolutionary functions of human sexual behavior. Now that we've looked at what makes human sexuality unique, let's explore some of the leading theories about why these traits evolved. What evolutionary advantages might they have provided to our ancestors? One major theory focuses on the role of sexual behavior in cementing social bonds. Humans are incredibly social animals, and our survival has long depended on cooperation in groups. Frequent non-reproductive sex, researchers argue, may have helped strengthen ties between partners and within social groups. The pleasure and intimacy of sex create positive associations that reinforce social connections. Consider the hormone oxytocin, often called the cuddle hormone, or love hormone. It's released during sex, childbirth, and breastfeeding. In humans, oxytocin has been shown to increase feelings of trust and bonding. This suggests that the pleasurable and bonding aspects of sex may have been key to its evolution in humans. This pair bonding function of sex may have been especially important given how vulnerable human infants are. A baby that has two invested parents is much more likely to survive than one with only a single caregiver. Sexual monogamy, or at least the illusion of it, helps ensure paternal investment by increasing a man's confidence that a child is his own offspring. But it's not just about making babies. Researchers have pointed out that humans, especially women, often have sex at times when conception is impossible, during pregnancy, while breastfeeding, after menopause, etc. This suggests sex plays important social functions beyond just reproduction. For example, consider the fact that humans are one of the only species where females experience menopause. In most animals, females remain fertile until death. But human women typically live decades after losing the ability to reproduce. Some researchers think this might be because the social and pair bonding functions of sex remained important even after the reproductive function was no longer relevant. Some scientists have suggested that non-reproductive sex may have helped our ancestors practice and improve their sexual techniques. Better sex might lead to more offspring in the long run. Others argue that pleasurable sex may have simply made people more likely to have sex frequently, increasing odds of conception. The privacy of human sexual behavior has also been the subject of much speculation. Some researchers think concealed ovulation in human females, unlike the obvious fertility signals in other primates, may have been an adaptation to reduce male-male competition and encourage pair bonding. Privacy in mating may have further reinforced this by making it harder for other males to know when a woman was sexually active. Face-to-face mating is thought to have similar pair bonding benefits. It allows for eye contact, kissing, and caressing, behaviors that release bonding hormones like oxytocin. This intimate form of sex may have helped cement emotional connections between partners. The evolution of diverse sexual orientations is still hotly debated. Some researchers have proposed that having a small percentage of non-reproductive individuals in a group might have benefited overall survival, perhaps by providing additional caregivers for children. Others argue that same-sex attraction may be a natural byproduct of the social bonding mechanisms that evolved to cement opposite-sex pairs. For instance, some researchers have pointed out that many of the same brain circuits involved in opposite-sex attraction are also active in same-sex attraction. This suggests that diverse sexual orientations might be a natural outcome of the flexible, socially oriented sexuality that evolved in humans. One intriguing theory looks at human sexuality through the lens of sexual selection, the idea that certain traits evolve because they're attractive to potential mates. Some researchers argue that human intelligence, creativity, and even moral behavior may have evolved in part because they were sexy to our ancestors. Consider the peacock's tail. It's beautiful, but it's also heavy and makes the bird more vulnerable to predators. It evolved because peahens found it attractive. Some researchers think human traits like art, music, and even kindness might have evolved through a similar process. They were sexy to our ancestors, even if they didn't directly contribute to survival. To recap, the key evolutionary functions proposed for human sexual behavior include cementing social bonds and pair bonds, ensuring paternal investment in offspring, practicing and improving sexual techniques, concealing fertility to reduce competition, and potentially selecting for traits like intelligence and creativity. In our next section, we'll look at how culture interacts with these evolutionary adaptations to shape human sexual norms and practices. Part 3. The interplay of culture and biology in human sexuality. So far, we've focused mostly on the biological and evolutionary aspects of human sexuality. But one of the most fascinating things about humans is how much culture shapes our sexual behavior. Let's look at how our biological heritage interacts with cultural influences to create the rich tapestry of human sexual expression we see around the world. First, it's important to note that while certain aspects of human sexuality seem to be universal, like seeking privacy for sex, or forming long-term pair bonds, there's also incredible diversity in sexual norms across cultures. This suggests that our sexual behavior is highly flexible and responsive to cultural conditioning. For example, while most cultures practice some form of marriage, the specifics vary widely. Some cultures are strictly monogamous, others practice polygamy, and some have complex systems of arranging marriages for political or economic reasons. The common thread is using sexual and romantic partnerships to create stable social units, but the details are culturally determined. Consider the Na people of China. They practice what anthropologists call walking marriage, where women and men remain in their maternal households for life. Sexual partners visit each other at night but don't live together or form nuclear families. Children are raised in their mother's household, often without knowing their biological fathers. This shows how flexible human mating systems can be, even while serving the basic functions of reproduction and child rearing. Similarly, while all cultures have some concept of sexual modesty, what exactly counts as modest varies enormously. In some societies, bare breasts are no big deal, while in others, women cover everything but their eyes. This shows how biological impulses, in this case, sexual arousal from visual cues, can be shaped by cultural norms. For instance, in many Pacific Island cultures, women traditionally went topless without any sense of immodesty. But exposure to Western norms has led to changes in these practices. This demonstrates how quickly cultural attitudes about sexuality can shift. Cultural factors also play a huge role in shaping attitudes towards different sexual orientations and gender identities. Some societies have long recognized multiple genders or had accepted roles for same-sex relationships. Others have strict taboos against any deviation from heterosexual norms. For example, in India, Hijras have been recognized as a third gender for centuries. In Native American cultures, two-spirit individuals who embodied both masculine and feminine traits were often respected and given special social roles. These examples show how cultures can create space for gender and sexual diversity, even in the absence of modern LGBTQ+ terminology. Researchers have noted that human cultural practices often serve to reinforce or extend evolutionary adaptations. For instance, marriage customs in many cultures include public declarations of commitment and fidelity. These cultural practices may help strengthen the pair bonds that evolved for evolutionary reasons. Consider the tradition of exchanging rings in Western marriages. The circular shape symbolizes eternity, and wearing the ring is a constant reminder of one's commitment. This cultural practice reinforces the biological tendency towards pair bonding. Another interesting area of research looks at how cultural shifts can change the evolutionary pressures on human sexuality. For example, the invention of reliable contraception has, for the first time in human history, completely separated sex from reproduction for many people. Some researchers are exploring how this might be changing patterns of sexual behavior and even impacting our evolution as a species. The rise of online dating and hookup apps is another cultural shift that's changing how humans find sexual and romantic partners. This allows people to access a much larger pool of potential mates than ever before in human history. Researchers are just beginning to explore how this might impact human sexual behavior and mate choice in the long run. It's also worth noting that culture can create new evolutionary pressures. For instance, in societies where women's education is valued, there may be evolutionary pressure to delay childbearing. This could potentially impact the evolution of human reproductive biology over time. To sum up the key points on culture and human sexuality, there's huge diversity in sexual norms across cultures, showing the flexibility of human sexual behavior. Cultural practices often serve to reinforce or extend evolved tendencies. Major cultural shifts like contraception and online dating are changing the landscape of human sexual behavior. And culture itself can create new evolutionary pressures on human sexuality. In our next section, we'll take a deeper dive into the diversity of human sexual expression, looking at how it varies across cultures and throughout history. Part 4. The diversity of human sexual expression. Now let's explore one of the most fascinating aspects of human sexuality, its incredible diversity. Humans display a wider range of sexual behaviors, identities, and practices than any other species we know of. This diversity exists both across different cultures and within cultures over time. One area where we see tremendous variation is in how different cultures conceptualize gender. While most societies recognize at least two genders, many cultures around the world have traditionally acknowledged 3 or more gender categories. For example, in Samoa, Fa'afafine are biological males who embody both masculine and feminine gender traits. They're recognized as a distinct gender category and play important roles in Samoan society. Similarly, in Thailand, Katoi or ladyboys occupy a unique gender category that doesn't fit neatly into Western concepts of transgender identity. These examples challenge our assumptions about the binary nature of biological sex and gender. They show how culture can create diverse ways of understanding and expressing gender identity. Sexual orientation is another area of great diversity. While exclusive heterosexuality is the majority in most cultures, research has shown that many people experience some degree of same-sex attraction. Some societies have long-standing traditions of accepted same-sex relationships. For instance, in ancient Greece, relationships between adult men and adolescent boys were not only accepted but often celebrated as a form of mentorship. In some parts of New Guinea, all young men were expected to engage in same-sex activities as part of their initiation into manhood. These practices show how same-sex behavior can be integrated into cultural norms in very different ways. Even within the realm of heterosexual behavior, there's huge variation in what's considered normal or acceptable. Some cultures are very sexually permissive, while others have strict rules about when and how sex can occur. Consider the stark contrast between the Trobriand islanders studied by anthropologist Bronislaw Malinowski and Victorian England. In Trobriand society, children were encouraged to experiment sexually from a young age, and premarital sex was the norm. In Victorian England, on the other hand, even married couples were expected to limit sex to procreation, and any form of sexual excess was considered immoral. Looking at human history, we see that sexual norms can change dramatically over time within a single culture. For example, ancient Roman attitudes towards sex were much more relaxed than the Christian sexual ethics that later dominated Europe. In more recent history, the sexual revolution of the 1960s and 70s dramatically changed sexual norms in Western countries in just a few decades. One particularly interesting area of research looks at how different cultures have dealt with the potential conflict between the pair bonding and recreational aspects of human sexuality. Some societies have strict monogamy, while others have various forms of sanctioned non-monogamy. For example, in Tibet, fraternal polyandry, where multiple brothers share a wife, was traditionally practiced as a way to keep family lands intact. In some West African cultures, women can take female husbands, usually for economic reasons. These different approaches can be seen as cultural solutions to managing the complex evolutionary legacy of human sexuality. It's also worth noting the diversity in how different cultures approach sex education and the transition to sexual maturity. Some societies have elaborate coming-of-age rituals centered around sexuality, while others treat it as a purely private matter. For instance, in Mongaya, a Polynesian island, older women traditionally taught young men about sex, including techniques for pleasuring their partners. In contrast, many Western societies have struggled with how to approach sex education, often caught between religious conservatism and public health concerns. The age at which people are considered ready for sexual activity varies widely between cultures. Another fascinating area of diversity is in the role of non-reproductive sexual behavior. While all cultures recognize the reproductive function of sex, many also have traditions that honor non-reproductive sexual practices. This can range from tantric practices in some Eastern traditions to the celebration of postmenopausal sexuality in some cultures. For example, in Taoist sexual practices in China, the goal was often to cultivate spiritual energy rather than to reproduce. In some African cultures, grandmothers are seen as particularly sexually powerful because they're no longer bound by reproductive concerns. The diversity of sexual fetishes and paraphilias is another uniquely human phenomenon. While we don't have time to delve into this complex topic, it's worth noting that humans have an incredibly wide range of sexual interests and turn-ons, many of which have no clear evolutionary benefit. For instance, formicophilia, sexual interest in insects crawling on the body, or objectophilia, sexual attraction to inanimate objects, are examples of sexual interests that seem to be uniquely human and don't have any obvious adaptive value. Yet they persist as part of the wide spectrum of human sexuality. To recap the key points on sexual diversity. Gender is conceptualized differently across cultures, often with more than two categories. Sexual orientation exists on a spectrum, with different cultures having different ways of categorizing and expressing same-sex attraction. Sexual norms and practices vary widely between cultures and can change dramatically within cultures over time. Different societies have found various ways to balance the pair bonding and recreational aspects of sex. And humans display an incredible diversity of sexual interests and practices, many of which go far beyond simple reproduction. This diversity poses fascinating questions for researchers. How much of this variation is due to cultural factors versus biological differences? How do cultural sexual norms interact with individual desires and behaviors? These are active areas of ongoing research. In our final content section, we'll look at some of the big debates and open questions in the study of human sexuality. Part 5. Ongoing debates and open questions. As we wrap up our exploration of human sexuality, it's important to recognize that this is still a very active and often controversial area of research. There are many ongoing debates and open questions that researchers are still grappling with. Let's look at a few of the big ones. One major debate centers on the relative importance of nature versus nurture in shaping human sexuality. How much of our sexual behavior is innate, and how much is learned? This debate plays out in discussions of sexual orientation, gender identity, and even basic sexual preferences. For example, consider the case of David Reimer. Born male, he was raised as a girl after a botched circumcision damaged his penis. Despite being raised as female, Reimer always felt male and eventually transitioned back. This case has been used to argue for the innate nature of gender identity, but it's just one data point in a complex debate. Another big question is about the evolutionary origins of some uniquely human sexual traits. For example, why did humans evolve to have concealed ovulation, unlike most other primates? One theory suggests it might have encouraged pair bonding by making it less clear when a woman was fertile, thus requiring more frequent sex. But this is still debated. Why do humans experience menopause, which is rare in the animal kingdom? The grandmother hypothesis suggests that post-reproductive women might have boosted their genetic success by helping raise grandchildren. But again, this is just one of several competing theories. And what evolutionary pressures might have led to the development of diverse sexual orientations? The gay uncle hypothesis we mentioned earlier is one attempt to explain this, but it's far from settled science. The role of sexual selection in human evolution is another area of ongoing research and debate. Some researchers argue that sexual selection played a major role in the evolution of human intelligence, creativity, and even moral behavior. For instance, some theorize that human language might have evolved in part as a way to attract mates, a kind of verbal peacock's tail. But others are more skeptical about the importance of sexual selection relative to other evolutionary pressures. There's also ongoing debate about how modern cultural changes are impacting human sexuality. How are things like online dating, increasingly accepting attitudes towards LGBTQ+ identities, and changing gender roles affecting sexual behavior and even our biological evolution? For example, some researchers are exploring whether the widespread use of hormonal birth control might be affecting mate choice. Studies have suggested that women on the pill might prefer different types of male partners than when they're not on the pill. But the long-term implications of this, if any, are still unclear. One particularly contentious area of debate is around evolutionary psychological theories of gender differences in sexual behavior. Some researchers argue that men and women have evolved different mating strategies, leading to systematic differences in sexual behavior and preferences. For instance, some argue that men are evolutionarily primed to seek multiple partners, while women are more inclined towards monogamy. But critics point out that these theories often overlook the tremendous diversity in human sexual behavior and may be biased by Western cultural assumptions. The nature of human pair bonding is another area of active research and debate. Why did humans evolve to form long-term pair bonds, unlike most other primates? How do we balance this pair bonding tendency with the clear evidence that humans also often engage in extra-pair mating? Some researchers suggest that human pair bonding might have evolved as a kind of parental teamwork strategy to raise our particularly helpless infants. But this doesn't fully explain why pair bonds often persist long after children are grown, or why humans form romantic attachments even when they don't plan to have children. There are also ongoing discussions about how to best research human sexuality given its sensitive and often private nature. How can we get accurate data on sexual behavior? How do cultural taboos and social desirability bias affect self-reporting? For example, studies have shown that men and women give very different estimates of their number of sexual partners, with men typically reporting higher numbers. But logically, in a closed population, the average number should be the same for both sexes. This highlights the challenges in getting accurate self-reported data on sexual behavior. Researchers continue to refine their methods to try to get the most accurate picture possible of human sexual behavior. This might involve using computer-assisted self-interviews to increase privacy, or using biological markers to verify self-reported behavior. Finally, there are important ethical debates about how research on human sexuality should be conducted and applied. How do we balance scientific inquiry with respect for diverse cultural norms around sexuality? How should findings about the biological basis of sexuality inform social and legal policies? For instance, if we find biological markers associated with sexual orientation, should that information be used to argue for LGBTQ+ rights? Or could it potentially be misused to try to predict or even alter sexual orientation? These are complex questions without easy answers. To sum up the key areas of ongoing debate: the relative importance of nature versus nurture in shaping sexuality, the evolutionary origins of uniquely human sexual traits, the role of sexual selection in human evolution, the impact of modern cultural changes on sexuality, theories about evolved gender differences in sexual behavior, the nature and evolution of human pair bonding, methodological challenges in researching human sexuality, and ethical considerations in sexuality research and its applications. These debates highlight how much we still have to learn about human sexuality. As research techniques improve and we gain more data from diverse cultures, we'll hopefully get closer to answering some of these big questions. As we've seen throughout this exploration of human sexuality research, this is a complex and multifaceted field that touches on biology, psychology, anthropology, and more. Let's take a moment to recap some of the key points we've covered and consider their broader implications. First, we've seen that human sexuality is unique in the animal kingdom in many ways. Our concealed ovulation, frequent non-reproductive sex, long-term pair bonding, and diverse sexual orientations all set us apart from our closest primate relatives. This suggests that sexual behavior played a crucial role in human evolution, likely contributing to our complex social structures and cognitive abilities. Consider how different human society might look if we had, for instance, obvious signs of fertility like other primates. Our social interactions, pair bonding, and even our cultural norms around privacy and modesty might be radically different. Understanding these unique features of human sexuality can give us insight into why our societies are structured the way they are. We've also explored how human sexuality seems to serve multiple evolutionary functions beyond just reproduction. Sex appears to play important roles in cementing social bonds, ensuring parental investment in offspring, and potentially even driving the evolution of traits like intelligence and creativity. This multifaceted nature of human sexuality helps explain its central role in human cultures and individual lives. For example, the pair bonding function of human sexuality might help explain why romantic love is such a universal human experience, celebrated in art and literature across cultures. It might also shed light on why the breakdown of romantic relationships can be so psychologically devastating for many people. A key theme that's emerged is the interplay between our evolutionary heritage and cultural influences. While certain aspects of human sexuality seem to be universal, there's also incredible diversity in sexual norms and practices across cultures. This shows the flexibility of human sexual behavior and highlights how cultural practices can shape the expression of our biological tendencies. This has important implications for how we think about sexual norms and practices. It suggests that there's no one, natural, way for humans to express their sexuality. Instead, our sexual behavior is the result of a complex interplay between our evolutionary heritage and our cultural context. We've seen how this diversity extends to gender identities and sexual orientations. The wide range of gender systems and accepted sexual practices across cultures challenges simplistic biological determinism and reminds us of the complexity of human sexuality. This has profound implications for debates around LGBTQ+ rights and gender equality. Understanding the natural diversity of human sexual expression can help combat discrimination and promote more inclusive societies. The ongoing debates and open questions we discussed highlight how much we still have to learn about human sexuality. From the evolutionary origins of unique human traits to the impact of modern cultural changes, there are many fascinating areas for future research. These findings have broad implications for how we understand human nature and organize our societies. Recognizing the deep evolutionary roots of human sexuality can inform discussions about relationships, family structures, and sexual ethics. Understanding the diversity of human sexual expression can promote tolerance and challenge restrictive norms. In the realm of public health, this research has implications for sex education, STI prevention, and reproductive health policies. Recognizing the social bonding functions of sex, for instance, might lead to more holistic approaches to sexual health that go beyond just biological factors. For psychology and mental health, this research provides context for understanding individual sexual development and addressing sexual issues. Recognizing the complex interplay of biological, psychological, and cultural factors can inform more nuanced and effective therapeutic approaches. In the legal and political sphere, research on the biological basis of sexual orientation and gender identity can inform debates about LGBTQ+ rights and protections. At the same time, understanding the cultural flexibility of sexual norms reminds us that biology isn't destiny. More broadly, this research contributes to our understanding of what it means to be human. Sexuality is a fundamental part of the human experience, and understanding its origins and diversity can give us deeper insight into our nature as a species. As we move forward, it's crucial that we continue to support and engage with this important area of research. By deepening our understanding of human sexuality, we can work towards creating societies that better accommodate the full range of human sexual diversity while promoting health, well-being, and mutual respect. As we come to the end of our journey through the science of human sexuality, I hope you've gained a new appreciation for the complexity and fascination of this field. From the evolutionary origins of our unique sexual traits to the incredible diversity of sexual expression across cultures, there's so much to explore and understand about this fundamental aspect of human nature. Remember, what we've covered today is just the tip of the iceberg. The field of human sexuality research is vast and constantly evolving. New studies are constantly challenging our assumptions and deepening our understanding. That's why it's so important to stay curious and keep learning. If you found this topic as fascinating as I do, I encourage you to dive deeper. There are many excellent books, academic journals, and reputable online resources where you can learn more about the science of human sexuality. Always make sure you're getting your information from credible, scientific sources. For those of you who might be students or professionals in related fields, consider how this research might inform your own work or studies. Whether you're in psychology, anthropology, biology, or any number of other fields, understanding human sexuality can provide valuable insights. Even if you're just a curious individual, this knowledge can enrich your understanding of yourself and the world around you. It can help you appreciate the diversity of human sexual expression and challenge your own assumptions about what's normal or natural when it comes to sex and relationships. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what we've discussed today. What surprised you? What do you want to learn more about? Do you have any experiences or observations that relate to the research we've covered? Please share in the comments below. Your insights and questions can lead to fascinating discussions and might even inspire future video topics. If you found this video helpful, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Your support helps me continue creating content that explores fascinating scientific topics like this one. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss future videos. Finally, I want to encourage all of you to maintain a spirit of openness, curiosity, and respect when it comes to matters of human sexuality. Whether in your personal life or in society at large, remember that human sexual diversity is a natural and valuable part of our species. By understanding and respecting this diversity, we can create a world that's more inclusive, compassionate, and truly human. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of human sexuality. Until next time, stay curious and keep learning.